Hey folks, hope everyone is well. I just got done watching the second of the two IndyCar races this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, the two dual races I guess they had, and wanted to share some of my thoughts on the racing overall. It's a little bit different, or quite a bit different than videos I've done. I haven't done something like this in a couple years now, but oddly enough, the last one of these I did was about ovals maybe disappearing, and that one, being Pocono, absolutely did disappear. So I wanted to share my thoughts on this weekend's racing and mostly just see if there's anybody else out there that thinks of this in the same way I do, because it sure doesn't seem like there is. So let's get into this. IndyCar racing at Texas Motor Speedway. It's been going on since the birth of the IRL, billed for its high-speed side-by-side racing and close finishes to the line. They'll show it in the previews to the race. There's cars finishing side-by-side, big crashes, fights in the pit lane, all of the classic stuff we apparently want in a motor race. But this year, and actually the last couple of years, there's been some issues with Texas Motor Speedway. And I just want to talk about this quickly. I think everybody watching probably knows the point of all the controversy here, but Texas Motor Speedway was reconfigured. Turns 1 and 2, the banking was lowered down and widened to try to create some different styles of racing. And this was mostly done for NASCAR racing. The races in NASCAR have kind of always been boring since the track was the way it was for quite a few years. So lowering the banking in turns 1 and 2, I think Eddie Gossage, who runs the track there, and his team most likely were thinking that'll help cars have to brake coming into the turn, increase passing. Well, it hasn't succeeded in NASCAR. There's been a lot of issues with the cars passing. That might not be the track entirely. It's probably a lot to do with just the NASCAR package or whatever, but regardless, the change really didn't have a great impact there. And on the Indy side, it really changed the whole deal with the racing. I think the Indy cars actually could deal with the lower banking a little bit better, but it totally changed the race. It's not a track where you can go flat out around the whole thing anymore very easily, not on anything but a qualifying run. And so the racing has changed dramatically. To compound this, or to compound this, you like what I did there, they've sprayed PJ1 over parts of the track. So PJ1 is the sticky black stuff they put on the surface of the track, usually in the high lines around NASCAR tracks, that increases tire grip. And for whatever reason, this stuff doesn't work at all with Indy cars. It's also impossible, it seems, to actually wash it out of the track surface, at least easily. And so the residue of it or something is still there. You can clearly see it on the track for the IndyCar races, and it's essentially become a no-go zone for the Indy cars. Anytime a car gets up there, it just washes away straight into the wall or spins out. You actually saw it at the end of the second race here, where Will Power got into it in turns 3 and 4 and was seemingly out of the throttle, looking like he would make the corner, and just slid up and up and up and brushed the wall. So these two things together, the reduced banking and the PJ1 on the track surface, have just created this situation where Indy's having a really tough time putting on competitive racing, or at least that's the general sentiment that everybody's talking about online, that this is the worst thing ever. I'm seeing everything from that, you know, it's the most boring thing anybody's ever seen, to they should bulldoze Texas Motor Speedway and be done with it. So after watching both of the races this weekend, I wanted to go on the record and say that I had a fun time watching them both, and I thought overall they were pretty good Indy races. I've got a few reasons why I feel this way about it, but I don't think I need specific reasons. I mean, if you enjoy something, you enjoy something. You don't really need to back that up. But overall, I do think there were some really redeemable qualities to these races, and I'm not even really fishing for anything. I'm not going to pretend like I don't see the obvious issue here. Everything I stated, previously is absolutely true. The racing is very much confined to barely 2 lanes through the corners, mostly 1 lane. The passing itself has to be set up very specifically, and a lot of cars can't pass very easily. But regardless of this, I don't think the racing was that bad, or certainly not as bad as everybody seems to be making it out to be, or at least the loud ones that are out there. In both races, we really did see some on-track passing that wasn't manufactured. It wasn't specifically strategy-based. I think of it mostly in race 2, which everybody thought was going to be the harder race to pass in, but Pato O'Ward made a very clear pass on Joseph Newgarden towards the end of the race. I was surprised he did that. I thought he was actually going to wear out his stuff before the end, and maybe Joseph Newgarden was going to come back on him, or I thought Graham Rahal, honestly, was going to be able to come from 3rd position there, but the pass was clear. His car clearly could work through traffic. We saw that a little bit on the Saturday race as well, and a good amount of action towards the end of the race. Super happy Pato O'Ward got his first win. I think there's going to be a lot more to come from that driver for sure. Strategy is always an intricate part of oval racing, so it's good to see in both races that there were some differing strategies. Putting the tires on would speed the cars up a bit. For a short amount, you could do an undercut. I think we saw a few cars in the first race actually jump up and gain a lot of positions. I believe Pato O'Ward being one of those, just from putting on some new tires and undercutting a lot of the field. I think the one really unfortunate thing was the big crash at the start of race 2. That's totally unnecessary. I think once a season there's a pileup like this. Gateway last year, totally unnecessary, really takes a lot out of the race. We had, I think, 7 cars because of that first lap accident out of the race. That changes things quite a bit. Traffic was not nearly as much of an issue in race 2 that it was in race 1, and naturally there's just less cars out there, so there's a little less going on. So I wish that didn't happen. I do think, like Connor Daly said during the broadcast, I do think they have to figure that out. Maybe institute a higher speed or something coming to the flag so that folks aren't causing these melees. But otherwise, in the 2 races themselves, I thought the driving, was very good generally. There was the incident between Joseph Newgarden and Sebastian Bourdais in race 1, but that, seemed a little bit like a racing incident to me, not necessarily drivers racing poorly. So I could put a full stop in it there. I thought both Indy races this weekend were fun to watch. The strategy was good. Some of the battles were good. And ultimately, it was great to see Scott Dixon pick up another win, the legend there, and Pato O'Ward win his first race. So generally the feedback that I've seen online for the races this weekend are that it's the worst racing they've ever seen. The cars, need to be completely changed. Maybe we should never go back to Texas Motor Speedway, or then a couple folks saying the track should be bulldozed altogether. And I'm genuinely curious for folks that are on the extreme side of things, that Indy should never come back to Texas, or that the Speedway should be torn down altogether, if that's actually what you would want to happen. I think the folks that want Indy to leave Texas, I think what they want is for Indy to be at another oval. And I know IndyCar is looking at potentially racing, going to Richmond like they were supposed to, or going back to Homestead, or maybe Milwaukee, or hopefully Iowa. And yes, absolutely, if we can get some of those other ovals that we know race well, that don't have these problems with the track in the series again, I think it would be okay to leave Texas, but we shouldn't just leave Texas for the point of leaving Texas. IndyCar as a series, I think, needs ovals, and we're not far off from Indianapolis in the Indy 500 being the only oval on the schedule, and that, in my opinion, would be such a massive disaster. We saw a little bit of this back when kart was falling apart in the mid-2000s, and Milwaukee ended up being the only oval. And without ovals on the calendar, I really think IndyCar is just another formula series. I don't think the whole schedule should be ovals. It really needs to be this 1/3 or a little more than 1/3 of the schedule being different types of ovals, some high speed, some short track, having the road courses be another third, and then the street courses, being the last third of it. Having the diversity, but still having a strong oval, series of races is really what IndyCar needs to remain unique, remain the type of competition that it is. And we're so dangerously close to losing that. After the races this year at Texas, I wouldn't be surprised if the track goes away, just based off of everyone's feedback. But what's going to replace it? Hopefully IndyCar could find a replacement if it does end up leaving Texas. Another fast oval, maybe something like a Michigan. I don't think slotting in even like an Iowa or a Milwaukee would really fit the need to have another high-speed oval outside of Indianapolis, that Texas is currently fulfilling. But to suggest leaving Texas without any replacement or anything, I think would be a really bad move on IndyCar's part. And so if you look at it from that point of things, that IndyCar maybe doesn't have, a replacement for Texas, or couldn't line anything up this year for Texas, I think it's fine that they held the races there. The races themselves, like I said before, were pretty enjoyable from my point of view, even if they weren't perfect. Another common sentiment I see too is that they should really just fix the cars. Why is it the 3rd year in a row or 2nd year in a row now with the PJ1 that the racing's exactly the same? And I think it's just a really hard or impossible, maybe, technical solution. IndyCar is not going to have these cars race around Texas like they used to side by side. I think 2016 with the crazy finish with Hinchcliffe and Rahal side by side to the line was the last time that we were ever going to see racing like that. IndyCar has repeatedly tried to get away from pack racing. There's too many consequences to it, and it's just way too risky. And the way things are these days, I just cannot see it happening again. one of the things I like to do is watch older racing. I go through and watch a lot of old races, one-offs, but then also, you know, complete seasons of IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One from years past, through the 80s and 90s, 2000s, random stuff here and there, but just to see what it was like. It's equal part nostalgia and curiosity to watch, you know, some of the older races and educate myself on. And the racing in IndyCars these days, having watched a lot of older races, especially recently, is so good. Even in the races we saw this weekend. If you look back, I recently watched the 1989 Milwaukee IndyCar race, and that had 2 cars finish on the lead lap, and it was interesting, but Rick Mears really led, you know, pretty much the whole race. And it doesn't even compare to the racing that we see these days. The commentary and everything was all over the place, you know, back then, talking through random storylines, barely focusing on the race for parts of it. We just have it so good now, and I think it's worth sitting back and taking a look at that. It can always be better, and I don't think it's wrong to try to suggest changes or make sure, you know, folks know when things aren't the way that you would like to see them. But the insane negativity is just not productive at some point. And I really think a lot of it's folks riffing on one another. You see folks say a couple negative things, and you also want to chime in with your opinion on it, and it all tends to skew negative. It's no secret that the internet tends to breed negativity, but it seems especially bad lately and with the race this weekend. So hope there's a few other people out there that maybe share a similar opinion to mine. I'm certainly not saying the races this weekend were the best thing in the world, but I think we'd have a long way to go before something like this is completely unwatchable, and we need to hold on to the oval races as best we can. We've lost so many ovals in the past few years with no meaningful replacement. We really cannot lose any more without it really not feeling like an IndyCar series anymore. So I'll see if this gets a bunch of hate, or if maybe there's a few folks out there that enjoy it. Maybe nobody will watch it altogether. It's a bit different than my normal thing. Promise to go back to the normal stuff again soon, but hope you enjoyed it. I hope some of you enjoyed the IndyCar racing this weekend. I'm really excited for the Indy GP and the Indy 500 and to see how the rest of the season goes. So I think this might have been entirely way too long compared to what I wanted it to be. But yeah, hope other folks out there share similar thoughts. And it goes without saying, but it's obviously fine to enjoy something, even if everybody else doesn't. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all again next time.